already, yeah. So friends, colleagues, and fellow journalists across the globe, this is Uday from Kaka, India. Hearty welcome to the first of the series of stimulating dialogues on journalism and religion in times of the COVID-19 pandemic that the International Association of Religion Journalists, IARJ, is hosting. We are hoping to organize between 6 and 8 such dialogues in the coming months in the Middle East and North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, Latin America, North America, Northern and Central Europe, Southern Europe, and the Mediterranean. I have been in journalism for over 4 decades, and only a few days back, I retired from the stage. Is always a journalist, and I don't want to be an exception to this golden rule. Soldier of truth and justice. Religion has always been a core area of my work. It's my honor and proud privilege to be the moderator of the first of this series of dialogues, the Asian chapter. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused an almost cataclysm worldwide. It has come as an agent of death and the greatest speed breaker ever in human history. Life has lost its familiar rhythm, momentum, and speed in every nook and corner of the globe. Everyone has been forced to re-strategize one's way of life. Religion plays a crucial role in our lives, and in the current global pandemic, it both unites and divides nations and communities. Some faithfuls are complying with the standard health protocols, and others are simply defying them. Both sides invoke their faith for their action. Some COVID-19 policies have affected the way people practice their faith. In the process, some are defying the ban and restrictions. The Easter, the Ramadan month, and the Passover at the peak of the pandemic in April were observed with less festivities than usual. In Bengal, the province I hail from, the biggest religious festival of Hindus, Durga Puja, worshipping goddess Durga, will be held in October, just 2 months away. Every year, millions of people throng community puja pandals for 5 consecutive days, almost round the clock. Already, the government here has put restrictions asking the organizers to hold the pujas on a very small scale. Will the people abide by them? The fear is the restrictions may be, to quote our good old Shakespeare, more honored in the breach than in the observance. In many cases, science is being pitted against religion to fight against the pandemic. A recent study made in Bangladesh reveals that 300 methods not backed by science have been prescribed by different faiths to tackle COVID-19. Religions do teach us peaceful coexistence of different forms of living organisms found in nature. The masks are now ubiquitous throughout the world, but for centuries, Jainism has been enjoining on its followers to wear masks so as not to harm other organisms or get harmed by them. Now, with these introductory words, I set the tone of the dialogue and welcome our panelists this afternoon. They are Waka Gilani, contributor to the News International Pakistan, Abid Rahman Zurari from Malay Mail, Malaysia, and Priyadarshini Sen, independent journalist, India. Now, I will straight away pose a few questions and invite the speakers to respond to each of them. Right. My first question is to our lady. Ladies first, as is customary. Well, Priya, let me call you Priya because that helps both the audience and me also. Now, can you tell us about the major contributions that religious institutions and faith communities make for the common good of society during the pandemic in your country?
Thank you, Uday, for your question, and thank you to everyone who's tuned in, taking the time out for the session. So, in India, the pandemic has exacerbated polarization and sectarian conflicts across the country. But what we find truly remarkable in the middle of all this is the great innovation on the part of religious leaders and state actors, but also to communities outside of their areas of influence through interfaith work. And this was best illustrated during the lockdown, which was one of the most stringent lockdowns across the world, early March by the Indian government. And overnight, thousands of migrant workers were stripped of their livelihoods and denied basic food, shelter, clothing. And it was such a critical moment in the pandemic when Sikh mosques, Hindu temples, gurudwaras, and religious leaders associated with these faith establishments really stepped in to help the poor migrant workers. And this interfaith effort carried forward even in the post-lockdown period as it was lifted in a phased-wise manner across India, where we found that Sikh gurudwaras had expanded their ambit of services to include free ambulance services, meals on wheels, grocery deliveries, community kitchens. There were Islamic religious institutions and mosques offering their premises as quarantine centers and also allowing social activists and political leaders to sensitize people about pandemic-induced protocols. We found religious leaders, residents' welfare associations carrying out sanitization of mosques and other religious establishments, and through that process making people aware of the need to follow pandemic protocols. What was also very critical was how these faith leaders stepped in to help offer psychosocial counseling at these isolation centers and quarantine centers, making people aware of the need to arise out of this pandemic. And that was through the language of the sacred, terms such as forbearance, finitude, a larger calling, acceptance. So these were used as methods to actually help people overcome the problem. And one quick last point there, if I'm not taking too much of your time, was, we've always found that religion and science have been seen as incompatible with each other. But what mostly, not always, but mostly, but what this pandemic has done is it has really forefronted the role of religious leaders, bringing them closer to communities and people, inspiring hope and confidence. A lot of people dismiss their services as non-essential, but to a lot of others, they offer emotional support, solidarity, and bonding.
Yeah. Excellent, Priya. Now, Waka, your thoughts, please.
Thank you so much for this. Yeah, I think there have been interesting time in our country for the past 5-6 months when the pandemic was on its peak. And since we have opted a new normal from the last week actually, because the number of cases are declining gradually. But in these 5 months, we saw very interesting times where we see a lot of cooperation and contribution of religious institutions, religious organizations, and religious groups of different faiths and sects to serve the community. Because a lot of millions of people in the country are daily wages, and more than 50% population is below the poverty line. So all the religious organizations and religious political groups, they step up to help out the needy people. Those are suffering from, like, they have lost their jobs, they have lost their work because of the lockdown situation. So, for example, I talked to one representative of Jamaat Islami, which is a right-wing prominent Islamic group, political Islamic group, and they said we have not seen the response of people in the past 10 years that good to serve people and to help the needy people, to give them ration and groceries and these things. So, and other than these private groups, we also saw that the government's religious institutions, like we have one Council of Islamic Ideology that helps the state and the government in actually framing laws according to Islam and giving advices to the government and state in other issues. They also issued particular and special directions, and they urged all the people where the Muslims are in majority, more than 95% are Muslim majority country. So they urge the people to actually help the needy people and dedicate their amount of charity, zakat, which is in terminology we call, for the people those have lost their jobs. And even usually the zakat is deducted in the month of fasting Ramadan. But the Council of Islamic Ideology, they urge the people actually to give zakat even before the month of fasting, so that they can help all those. So we see a tremendous and remarkable actually contribution and cooperation of religious institutions with the government and with the people and society. But there have been some examples of some discrimination as well. Like mostly being the Muslim majority population, there have been good work, but we saw in some areas of the country, like in Karachi, we observed that where the Christians are even the discrimination was made on some sectarian dimension while distributing ration, distributing food, and distributing groceries, which was condemned by the government and the other civil society groups. So I think that's it.
That's great. That's great. Now, Zurari, how would you respond to the first question?
Hi, thank you, Uday, and good day, everybody. Well, I have two stories from Malaysia. In a way, we had a unique situation where just when the pandemic hit, we also had an unprecedented change of government. So yet again, back in end of February into the early March. So with a new government in Malaysia where Islam is the religion of federation and it very much intertwines with politics, the new minister in charge of religious affairs had announced back in February and March a COVID-19 aid fund under the Federal Islamic Agency, which we call JAKIM. Well, this fund would also, interestingly enough, benefit non-Muslims. So why was this interesting? Is because it is important because it addressed previous criticisms that the Islamic institutions in this country, although they are funded by all taxpayers, including non-Muslims, mostly seem to benefit just Muslims. So with this fund, we see non-Muslims are also recipients of the fund. So up until now, this fund has disbursed roughly the equivalent of around 80 million US dollars. In Malaysian ringgit is around 300 plus million ringgit. However, a concern is that the aid has been circulated through several Islamic state Islamic agencies, and it will be actually interesting to see much more transparent data about the percentage of non-Muslims that actually receive this fund. We look forward to that one day soon. Another interesting story from Malaysia is of the Buddhist charity foundation called Zuchi. They are, if I'm not mistaken, from Taiwan, but it has also a branch in Malaysia. So Zuchi has always chipped in during disasters in our country, whether during flooding, a lot of natural disasters. They would usually mobilize their followers to help and aid those in need. Well, since February, Zuchi has donated tens of thousands of medical equipments, face shields, free vegetarian meals, especially for frontliners. And this is very important because usually when this sort of natural disasters happen, is usually the Muslim organization that go in front first. But this time around, we see Zushi taking the first step towards this, and after that, we also are having seen more and more religious-based charity organizations coming to the forefront.
Oh, that's super, super. Now, my second question is again to Priya. Priya, can you please talk about the tensions between the government and the religious institutions, or between religious communities in your country that have come up as a result of the restrictions imposed because of the pandemic, and how are they being resolved?
Sure, Uday. Thank you for your question. Am I audible?
Yeah.
So straight off the bat, Uday, the one incident that really stands out as one that marked a whole spate of hate and victimization and marginalization of religious minorities was a gathering of an Islamic missionary movement in Delhi called the Tablighi Jamaat, where believers from different parts of the world had congregated in Delhi for a week-long retreat. But even though it was injudicious to actually hold a meeting such as that in the middle of a pandemic, but what emerged out of that was flames of hate that literally engulfed the whole country, where Tablighi Jamaat members were not just attacked and arrested and stigmatized, but it also led to this very cynical religious profiling of Muslims, where they were socially and economically boycotted. And in the middle of a pandemic, where all of us are struggling with livelihood issues and food and shelter, on top of that, Muslims are having to contend with this hate and stigmatization, and this was actually what was very annoying about the whole thing was at the time when the Tablighi Jamaat incident happened, a lot of other religious congregations were allowed to operate without much media attention or being featured in official briefings. They were allowed. And more recently, the Ram temple in Ayodhya was inaugurated by the Prime Minister in the middle of a pandemic, and the asymmetries of faith came through in a very clear fashion when has been coming through over a period of time, and this has rankled a lot of different sections of society, including Hindu faith leaders and tribals and those who felt alienated from the larger questions of concerning the country. And besides that, there have been people who have been using the pandemic as a means to carry out religious conversions. And even after the lockdown was imposed on India, faith leaders were unhappy about the slam down method used by the government to really close down places of worship without taking a lot of their views into consideration. Now, coming to your question about how these are being resolved, a lot of interfaith activities happening now by faith leaders and religious organizations to help people stand together in the middle of a pandemic and bring solidarity and not get vitiated by all the hate campaigns that are going around. And that is coming through places of worship, where religious and spiritual leaders are telling people about how to approach the pandemic, how to be more caring and kind towards people, even if they don't, if their views don't align with yours. And also, Zoom sessions and digital platforms have escalated, where people are finding different ways to come together, even through creative channels such as painting and music and poetry readings, songwriting. So a lot of different activities are taking place while all this polarization and marginalization is happening. If that answers your question, Uday.
Okay.
Uday, does it answer your question?
I think he needs to unmute himself.
Uday, your microphone.
Please unmute yourself, Mr. Uday. Mr. Uday, can you please unmute yourself? Can you please unmute yourself, Mr. Uday? I think the question goes to me if I
Yeah, I
start
think perhaps Wakar can continue
responding. I
first.
think the second question which Mr. Uday raised is the most interesting topic in my view, which we observe while covering religion during the pandemic, because it created a lot of conflicts within the different religious groups. For example, the biggest issue was the implementation of standing operating procedures for the worship places and for the mosques. And that was very difficult task for the government because the religious institutions and the mosque imams and the other worship places people, they were not willing to actually implement all the SOPs, standing operating procedures, which the government devised to actually take care for the pandemic, or sorry, to avoid the pandemic situation. But we saw on many Friday sermons during the peak times of the pandemic, there has been a conflict between the law enforcement agencies and the religious institutions and religious groups, because a lot of people wanted to go to offer their Friday sermons. And even in many mosques, even in the capital city and other big cities, we saw thousands of people. They were going to the mosque without caring of the SOPs, without taking any protection or safety measure. The other bigger conflict which we saw was within the different sects of the Islam. Like, because in Pakistan, the first cases of the coronavirus of COVID-19 came from Iran actually. The people, Shia Muslims, those traveled to Iran and they were pilgrims there. When they returned, they caught this virus because Iran has been caught up in that virus very much by that time. So all the anti-Shia groups and other right-wing Muslim majority groups, they started criticizing Shias that you have brought pandemic to this country. And again, after a lot of efforts, then the government came and they after some weeks, we saw that, just like Priya mentioned, that many other Muslim preaching groups, Sunni Muslim preaching groups, they were holding their worships and they were holding their gatherings and processions without taking care of SOPs, without any safety measures. So, and a lot of COVID-19 cases erupted in the country because of those things. Even in the capital city, more than 50% cases emerged in because of those religious gatherings. So that was a conflict.
Waka, I will just interrupt.
Yeah.
Waka, I will just interrupt. Yeah, we're running short of time, so if
Yeah.
we just can shorten your answer.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So just last two things, there was also a conflict actually because we see a strong disbelief from the right-wing religious groups that they don't believe in this virus and they say this is a man-made virus. It is a conspiracy from America and it's a conspiracy to see that to actually distribute a vaccine which will actually start reading minds of people of the Muslims in our country, and it's a conspiracy by American and Western world. So these conflicts we have been seeing in the country, and the government has been trying to tackle with a lot of debates and through law enforcement agency. Even just last thing that even at the end the government formed a big committee into the ministry so that if everybody talks about a conflicting situation or creates conspiracy theory about the virus, then they will try to have control of that through legal measures.
Okay. Okay, Zurari, your thoughts on this? Briefly.
Yeah, just briefly. I mean, just like in South Asia, the Muslim Tabligh missionary community became the biggest target in Malaysia, and subsequently they became the largest contributor in infections, resulting in more than half of all the infections. But curiously, also in Malaysia, the biggest tension, just like in Pakistan, seems to be within Muslims themselves. But it's not Sunni versus Shia, but it's more local Muslims and migrant Muslims or refugees. There was a very much heightened hostility and negativity towards migrants and refugees online, not just to them, but also to those who are sympathetic towards them, and also the media that covered these issues positively. So when mosques were reopened a few months ago, they remain barred to foreign Muslims due to government's claim that the rate of infection is higher. But this is actually a veiled reference towards undocumented migrants and refugees. So up until now, this issue has not yet been resolved, with the latest development being police investigations against Qatar-based media outlet Al Jazeera for a documentary highlighting the mistreatment of migrants. And one of the migrant workers interviewed in the documentary was even subjected to a manhunt to be deported and then banned from re-entering the country from Bangladesh. Yeah, so he is up until now still under detention. So hopefully we get to see this xenophobia abating as the pandemic gets better.
Okay. See, since we're running out of time, I'll just ask one question and expect an answer from one of you. And my question is, let me address this question to Priya. Priya, to what extent do you think, can you talk about some of the prescriptions to fight the pandemic, which may have turned out to be unsubstantiated? In just a couple of sentences.
Yeah, sure. I'll just try and make it as short as possible. So a lot of religious leaders have been talking about indigenous remedies in the middle of a pandemic, which they claim to be grounded in religion and handed down over generations. But a lot of those claims are unproven and unsubstantiated. So there's a very major yoga guru in India called Baba Ramdev, who has followers millions across the world. And he got into major trouble because he was talking about already having medicine to cure the pandemic, and notices were served to him. A lot of other religious leaders who were holding large congregations succumbed to the virus, and they also infected others. So yeah, these are two examples I can think of.
Okay. Well, we come to the fag end of this wonderful dialogue. With such wonderful viewers, there's no need to sum up the proceedings. I would rather conclude with the words of India's greatest modern poet and thinker, Nobel laureate Tagore, and I quote him: "Light up the lamp of your heart deep inside you, permeate life with the scent of the sandalwood." Let me repeat: light up the lamp of your heart deep inside you, permeate life with the scent of the sandalwood. This is my translation anyway. Now, thank you so much, my friends and very, very learned audience, for sparing your valuable time to listen to this important dialogue. Stay safe and well, and goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done, guys.
Thank you. Thank
We
you.
have stopped live streaming, and we've completed. Sorry, on time. We lost Wakar for some reason. He's probably having some internet connection problem.
Oh.
But you did great. You did great.
Oh.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I don't know. Any comment from your side?
We are no longer streaming, yes?
I'm sorry.
We are no longer streaming, yes?
We have stopped streaming.
Okay.
I can assure you. David is here. David, can you show yourself? Can you click the video again and the microphone?
Me? Oh, okay.
There you are. Hi, David. And can you switch the microphone on as well? Can you switch the microphone? Click the mute button.
David's window is there, yeah, but we can't see him as yet.
There's the mute button on the left, bottom left corner. David?
Can you hear me now, Andy?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh,
Good.
David, can you hear us, David?
Yes,
Hi, David.
a wonderful seminar. So informative.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, you guys did superbly, and particularly in kicking off these global series of seminars. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I was worried about the